My guest for today is a gentleman who has distinguished himself in the field of consumer care, media, and now the OTC business in the pharmaceutical industry. Friends, I have great pleasure in inviting our guest for today, who is Mr. Davel Ketker, Vice President for Consumer Care for Glenmark Pharmaceuticals Ltd. Davel comes in with almost 25 years of fantastic experience across three industries, one of consumer, second of media, and now into pharma. We will hear him as to how he shares his perspectives on his journey in initially spending 10 long years with consumer companies such as Godrej, Heinz, and how he learned the rope brand building in the consumer industry. Moving on from consumer, he joined the media industry, having worked for world-class global organizations such as Disney and Turner, and enriched his experience on media industry and media entertainment as well. To be a part of the pharma industry, though not in the prescription vertical, but in the OTC consumer business. And this again is very interesting, and we will learn from him as to what it takes to succeed in an OTC brand building environment as well. So I would like to extend a very warm welcome to Davel as one of our esteemed guests for this series. Hello, Davel. Good afternoon. Can you see me and hear me?
Hi. Yes. How are you doing? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can see you and I can hear you very clearly, Davel. Thanks a lot, actually, Davel. It's a pleasure to be meeting you for the first time, and that too as an esteemed guest on the Quest for Excellence series. It's wonderful to obviously interact with you as one of the industry leaders in having a rich, varied experience across industries like consumer care and media, and now into the pharma consumer space. So it was only very apt for us to invite you as our guest because there's nothing better to learn from experienced professionals who built their careers around these verticals and would have a lot to share for our marketeers community, who is 1,000+ strong right now, and tunes into our YouTube channels and podcasts for hearing and to the leaders. Yeah, so there's a lot of takeaway, and so at the outset, I want to thank you very much for having agreed to be a part of this initiative. That's one. And secondly, when I look at your career, right, I mean, when I just get into the discussion, it's really nice to see a gentleman who has distinguished himself having worked in all the three verticals in an area and not just one confined to pure pharma per se, but starting off in consumer care, then moving on to media, and now into something which is OTC kind of pharma. So let me start by asking you, Dhaval, when you look back, I mean, in retrospect, about now almost 2 decades plus, what's been your kind of high points or learnings as you've traversed through these three very diverse yet interconnected industries, and if you can share your learnings and high points, to kickstart our conversation, that would be really nice.
Sure. Firstly, thank you, Shailesh, for having me. Really appreciate you reaching out and having me on the panel here to have a conversation, and I'm sharing my thoughts where some of the best of the minds have come before me. I really want to thank you for the opportunity. When Shanta told me, I said, sure, I'll connect with you and we can take it forward. So thank you very much for investing your 1 hour with me. With that background, I'll, you asked me about what are my high points in career. I think my, as you said, I have kind of moved across the industry, and that has been a choice and not a serendipity. So for me, I always wanted to kind of try my hand at different industry and not be confined by one. With that in perspective, I've always kind of looked across industry categories. But if I look at the career high points, I think, instead of talking about what I have done in which are the brands, I've worked with some of the best Indian companies, some of the best multinationals. I've worked with some very famous entrepreneurs and some very talented leaders in Indian and MNCs, both sides. I've seen two different cultures very closely, how Indians work and how MNCs work. But if you ask me the high points of career, I think for me, the first high point was, being, laying my foundations in consumer goods. I think that's my first high point. I enjoyed all my time in different companies, different leaders. I was blessed to work with some of the most fantastic minds and encouraging minds over the years who invested their time and effort in making me what I am today. So that was one important high point of handling brand management, FMCG sales. That really is a very fast-paced world and complex world, which you kind of learn a lot because the space of action is very high. And when you are in consumer goods marketing, you typically have a perspective which is next best to the CEO, because you do a little bit of marketing, you do finance, you do R&D, you do a little bit of coordination on supply chain, every function. So that allows you to kind of have a bird's eye view of the entire business in general. So that was one. Second high point, I think, for me was personally being receptive to change. I think I like changing. I personally believe in one philosophy that you have to be the change first rather than seeing change outside. So I tried to change myself into different industry, being uncomfortable in a situation where I was a novice and others were experts. So where you have to unlearn the baggage of an industry and relearn something where others are an expert. So that, to me, the entire process of change is a high point, and I really enjoy change. That's something that I like in personally as well as professionally. So I always try to see if I can catch up some new habit every 6 months or so, or 1 year or so. So it kind of keeps me agile from change orientation. The third high point is, for me at least, transitioning from a functional to a business lens. I think that was thanks to some of the mentors that I have in my own life and who kind of handheld my transition from being a functional leader to a business leader. Because the gamut at a business leader is very high. It's not just a sales or marketing or a finance or whatever job. It involves systems and process. It involves talent management. It involves, strategic understanding and laying foundation for something that is going to come few years down the line. Being involved in or driving being at the forefront of a change that you're setting, which many of the others can't see the way you can see, but you have to have faith in that process. So these are the 3-4 high points that I personally feel have helped me in my journey.
Awesome. Really, it's awesome to hear that coming from you straight off the bat, Davel. So those top 3 learnings, I think, will be really beneficial for people who are in pharma or, at mid-level wanting to move to a senior level position. So I think these 3 basic high points were very, very good to start off with.
Thank you.
And what I sensed is that when we look at your journey, right, you've spent considerable time in organizations, right? And in an industry sector. So that's something, so that I guess maybe you invested and you took, would I be right in saying you invested and you decided, let me spend time, learn the ropes of this industry. You spent 10 years in consumer goods. You spent 6 years in media. So you wanted to build gravitas, I guess. Would that be right to say? Because you felt it may add a lot of weight to your experience, right? Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, you would be. Reason being, I think, Shailesh, that again was a choice that I took. It was a conscious choice of spending time in an industry. I believe that, if you want to understand a particular industry, and I'm not talking about jobs, because jobs from an industry, one job to other sometimes happens despite your best interest, or intention, you kind of move jobs. But as long as you remain in the industry, I think for me that was important, because after you see 2 or 3 cycles or 4 cycles of an industry, you really understand the industry, because 1 year is usually good, 2 years can be good, but in a 4, 5 year, 10 year period, you see downturns. And how you see that downturn, how you find a opportunity in a crisis, how you kind of reinvent yourself, really comes alive, and it tests your core of what you are made of and how you handle crisis. And that was one of the reasons, irrespective of the industry, I've tried to spend more than 5, 6, 7 years in each industry, so that you understand things when they go wrong. How do leaders in that industry react? How can you react? How is competition reacting? How are consumers reacting? And then you can connect the dots, and that learning remains with you forever. So that is something you're right on.
Right. Great. I want to spend some time on the first decade where you spent that 10 years investing yourself in the consumer goods industry, right? And you worked with some of the really top tier companies like Heinz and L'Oreal and Godrej Consumer Products, right? Each one of them is a giant in its own right. Two are MNCs and one is a Indian homegrown but a very respected organization. So my first question to you is, what were your learnings? I mean, were there any differences in the brand building approaches or marketing processes that MNCs employ and Indian companies, consumer goods industries employ, or you feel the approaches are the same? So I just want to hear your thoughts around that. And second part of it is, COVID in the last 2.5 years has become a leveler for consumer goods industry, right? So even for pharma guys like us, we face challenges. We've seen consumers down trading on products and going for lesser known substitutes, or maybe even choosing. So overall, how has been this learning and experience of yours from a lens of a consumer care? Is just what I wanted to know more about.
Yeah. So to give an answer to the first question that you asked, in my view, what I have seen is that, whether you are an Indian company or a multinational, the approach to brand management typically has been broadly similar. I won't say it's very different, because the practices of brand management in India from a consumer goods lens has been pretty common, and same approach for everybody. What separates the two is the nature of the entity that they are, because MNCs are very large employee base across continents and thing. So systems and processes become extremely strong, because you cannot manage all individual components if there are no systems and processes. So therefore you follow that systems and processes which are global in nature, and you are aligned to that to some extent. You don't have too much of freedom to move that. But when you work with an Indian company, that is also one advantage you get, that you can create, because the reality is only it's not across all the world. The way the world is not your real stage. You may have presence in few countries, but not really global. So that freedom is also a very interesting thing, because some people like me who like freedom to work, and so not somebody not telling you do it this way, is more enjoyable, because then you can create something as a journey, and brand architecture, unlock the brand in a certain way that you envision, and that's the the marrying of science and arts of marketing. So it comes together. So that I thought that is the only difference I've seen, and to some extent I think the leadership that you work with is different. When you work with multinationals, the leadership is more systems and process oriented, unless obviously they're more into following a certain trajectory that has. But having worked with an Indian organization, I love the entrepreneurship spirit that we as Indian get thing. And that, I think, I also come from an entrepreneurial family, so I kind of like that, and suits my way of working. I like that kind of a thing, and that, to my mind, is really what keeps you alive in the day-to-day job. That it's like my own money and my own business, and I treat it that way, because if tomorrow I have to run a business, this is exactly how I'll run. I'll not run it any differently. So these are the only two minor variations, not really differences, but something that each does to their own strengths and weaknesses of the structure that they have. That's the first part. Second question you asked about how has COVID impacted in a way for the businesses in this last 2 years. I think you must have heard this answer from everyone. COVID has changed all of us in one way or the other. But I think one important change that COVID brought is the adoption of digital, which, digital commerce really went through the roof, and that's a great sign. Second thing I saw that was the fact that, talent is not restricted by coming to an office in a certain space on a certain time and being locked. I think we all learned that it can happen from wherever you are. Of course, offices are important and those things are there. So the balance between the two is where I think really is something interesting. And over a period of time, this trend will accelerate where companies will try to balance and give flexibility to organizations. Because I also seen like few days back, I saw that, that 5 new trends that got published, and in that was women in the work. First time in India it has happened that there are more women than men. It's 1,020 women to 1,000 men. So which means that when more women are coming, women will demand flexibility because of the kind of, many times men tend to go home and there is no change of a role. Many times that happens, but for a woman, the role completely changes when she goes. She's a daughter, she's a mother, daughter-in-law, she's a mother, she's a sister, those kind of things. And those things will put a little bit of a pressure on her, which means that policies in the organizations will change, which means that the progressive company will do that to attract women because they want more women in the workforce, which means that HR, business, brands, everything will start changing the language. And this may sound like a small thing, but it will accelerate and compound so fast that the first mover advantage of people or companies who take that will really be at the forefront of driving that. And I think they will benefit out of that kind of a thing. That's where talent will tend to kind of migrate. That's the second thing I see. Third thing from a COVID perspective is obviously I've seen more from here and now is the adoption of the health and wellness trend and people trying to take vitamins, minerals, supplements, and trying to exercise, trying to take care of their own self. So I think health and wellness in general is on the rise, and actually it's being led more by the millennials and the Gen Zs because they are more into health and wellness, unlike what we may believe, but they do take care of themselves. But that I think is a very interesting trend that I've seen in COVID period. Another change I've seen in COVID is also, what I always call there is a saying, right? Sales is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is reality. So you tend to kind of conserve what you have first because bad times do happen. And to my earlier point, when you work in an industry for some period of time, every 4-5 years you'll see one downturn, right? So that's when, at the end of the day, cash is reality. So how do you hold on to your base and, be frugal in what you're doing and try and kind of, cover your base first before going for expansion, because you're seeing the winter coming in. So right now in funding in the startup world, right? As you're seeing, a lot of companies are asking people to go because of the inflationary pressures in the US. Suddenly the funds have dried up and people are under things. So end of the day, it's all, profit is the sanity. As I say, profit is very critical. Cash is reality.
Yeah, excellent. No, it's really nice to hear you articulate it so well in terms of the impact of COVID on consumer spending and choices and the trends. And thanks enumerating it because that is the reality at the end of the day. Now, staying on this for a couple of more minutes on the consumer goods industry, is that pharma, is very strongly focused on brand building and building brands at the level of its customers, which is essentially the physicians and patients. And here we have the consumer goods, which is the end consumer, who consumes the product. Very often, and over the years of 2.5 decades, we've heard the marketing processes which get developed into consumer goods industry is very robust, right? I mean, you understand the customer trends inside out. You use a lot of research tools, psychometric tools, because our audience is marketeers who watch these interviews, Davel. So that's why my question. And get the insights. You do the segmenting of the consumers based on socioeconomic classifications and everything else. When it comes to pharma, there is a lot of uh, attention which can be paid even more. So, and other than that, the other processes like fundamental process positioning and reaching out to customers, digital, etc., is fine. What is your take on this? That there can never be any compromise on these fundamental processes, right? I mean, if you want to get your business right, your brands right, you've got to get to the core of the consumer. What's your take? I mean, as a marketer, would you in consumer, you can't compromise on these, right? What would be your take?
So I would agree. I think in pharma also, what happens in pharma is that the fundamental thing between the two industries is consumer and customer, right? In case of consumer goods, the brands tend to talk directly to consumers. In case of pharma, they tend to talk more to the customer. So there is a intermediary in between who makes the brand or breaks the brand, depending on the writing habit of the doctor. But anyway, the principles are pretty much same across the spectrum. So if I take it at a conceptual level, irrespective of the industry, and that's somewhere I haven't seen this in across 2-3 industries, the process remains the same. It's recruiting, retaining, rewarding consumer. So consumer or customer, but the process is same. It's the same thing. You have to recruit, retain, reward, and sometimes retrench. If you're not happy with that customer, you have to have a churn and move them out and get the new ones in. But the process remains the same fundamentally, irrespective of whichever industry you go in. So I think just the STP process that you follow, which is the segmenting, targeting, positioning, that changes because that goes through a different lens. You can have, in case of pharma, the kind of doctors that you go to, whether it's a CP, dermat, or whatever you want to reach out to, versus like in a consumer goods, you will go to a different male, female kind of a TG, geographic TG, psychographic TG, etc. Again, if you look at once your segmentation is right, I think then the targeting and positioning follows out of that. So it's very critical to have a segment for your own brand identified first, and then the rest is actually, it's a drill down. It's a double click on that, and you kind of discover the answer.
Absolutely.
So that's it. Yeah.
Not being a farmer guy, has it been a great advantage for you because you don't have any hallowed things?
Yeah, I think so, because that's one of the reason I consciously moved industry, because I don't want to be tagged as a, this is my personal view. Of course, I may be wrong, but my view is that after some time in an industry, or when you spend a considerable time, depending on how you define that considerable, I'll leave it to you. But after spending considerable time, you tend to understand the tricks of the trade. Okay, you know what shortcuts to take, you know how to kind of solve the problem, and you're happy doing that you can do it in your sleep also, beyond a point. So so it's actually not 25 years in a one industry. It's actually maybe 1 or 2 years multiplied by 25 years. So it's incremental learnings are slightly limited, unless a bad COVID year hits you. That suddenly changes the assumptions, and recession happens, and you're forced to do something different. But otherwise, in a business as usual thing, it's not like that really. Therefore, being an outsider point of view also allows you to be in a balcony a little bit, rather than on a dance floor all the time, and see the big picture, connect the dots across industry, connects the consumer trends across industry, see how competition have in the past worked in different industry, and how can that learning apply, see how technology is evolving outside, because in today's world, technology is the center of everything. So how's technology evolving, and what are you doing inside your business to kind of change that? How's talent changing? Because today's best talent, are they coming to the pharma industry in the day one? The answer is no, because today's best talent is not even coming to consumer goods. They're going to the startups of the world. So how is talent looking at it? So those things will impact in time to come. So these are the way I actually evaluate things.
All right, no, that's great. I mean, that is I think a very honest perspective that you've shared with us, Davel. I want to go to the next part of our interview, and that is with this decade plus experience in consumer goods, you then decide to move industries, you move into media, and you work for almost 6+ years in media like Turner and Disney. So straight again, the question is, what prompted you to make that change? Although they may be consumer facing, but still what made you change industry? Of course, apart from the fact that you had mentioned in the outset of the interaction that you don't want to get typecast, but you want to learn and essentially the same. And secondly, what learnings? Because in media, in media industry, we all the time talk of media buying, media spending, and all that stuff. And now the importance of media in the current context is so important: digital media, social media. So when you look at all this from a 360-degree approach, Dhaval, what's your take on the media stint? Plus, how do you apply that in today's scenario? Is just something I thought of picking your mind on.
See, the reason for me to shift was one. I was more interested as a consumer in media. Okay, I watch media as a kid. I've been into cartoons and graphic novels and things like that, and that's why I moved to Disney and then Cartoon Network, Pogo, and then I headed the channel for HBO and Warner Brother movies because I like movies. I like this kind of thing. So it just fundamentally I love that. And if you're getting paid to do what you do, so why not? Was the way I saw it. So. But moving into the industry was something because it was a hard decision, more heart than mind as such. Because if you love something, then the outcomes are secondary. I just have followed my heart in all my personal professional life. So that's the reason I shifted. And the journey was very nice. I met some of the fantastic people in the industry. I had a lovely exposure to the industry, worked across some of the best brands like Disney, Cartoon Network, Pogo, HBO, Warner Brother movies. The fundamental difference in the two is that, media is a new industry, a 15-20-year-old industry versus FMCG is a 100-year-old industry. So of course, the systems, processes, practices are extremely different, and therefore availability of talent is different. Therefore, they take people from consumer goods into the business because to scale the thing. So but having said so, they have more in the media industry. You will have more vivacity, more more hunch on what will work, and because no amount of research can tell you what content will work. Okay, end of the day, it just clicks, and sometimes it doesn't. Like sometimes you feel that I want to refresh content, but in kids' content, you will see that it's not refreshed. There is a consumer insight behind that also, that kids like to, the world is changing dramatically from them again and again, because every day it's a new learning when you are a kid. Now you take that new learning very when you're of a certain age of 15, 20, nothing new is happening in your life. Okay, you learn, the construct of the so-called world, but when you're a 5-7-year-old kid, every day there is a new learning and it's changing, and that in that 2, 3, 4, 5 years, when so much of change is bombarded on you, you need familiarity. And that's where kids love to be, in that old imaginary world of the same, either a Chota Bheem or a Tom and Jerry, and they watch the same thing again and again and again. Anybody who has a kid will know that they don't get bored, because that's a sense of comfort also for them. And repeat watching is very critical, therefore. But that doesn't work in live action content. Once you watch it, that's it. You'll never watch it again, because of your adult mind will move on. There's no novelty in that for you.
Yes.
So businesses operate on different insights, but the fundamentals still in both the business remain the same. As I said, recruiting, retaining, and rewarding consumer. Whether you're watching content or whether you're buying a soap or a hair color or a skin cream, it's the same thing. And end of the day, if that process of segmenting, targeting, positioning is right, I think you enjoy that. The outcomes are also pretty good then for the brands, and then either you have a leading brand or lacking brand.
Right.
So that's the way I see it.
Oh, brilliant. What I learned is how you looked at it from an outside and from the TG of kids, what they need in terms of refreshing content every day, to how probably it doesn't become so much of importance once you get into your adolescent years. And those insights fuel the content creation and the mapping of the journey, depending on the TG that you have. And that's something which is again relevant from a marketing standpoint for us in pharma as well. Who's the TG and how do we actually customize it based on what the insights are? I think that's something which I probably would like to take home as a learning for our community as well. That's Very well said. Moving to, with such a rich experience in marketing, brand building, even including industries, you then decide that yes, you would move to the next step, which is essentially a P&L role, and you want to move into a business leadership role, obviously, right? So you joined Piramal, and I think Piramal has been one of the most respected, companies in the OTC space, and So, how was your journey with Piramal, Dhaval? Any learnings from a marketing standpoint? Anything different, or it was just going back to your Godrej consumer days, or which more refreshing? But how was your journey? And can you share some interesting pieces for our community?
Yeah, for me, it was in many ways, again, I mean, a company is as good as the leaders you work with and the teams that you work with, right? There is no right and wrong company. It's your experience with your surrounding that defines for you, the company and the culture. So I was lucky enough to be with a great team working alongside them, as well as great leadership which supported me. So I've always been blessed on that front. And Piramal, in fact, was really a very similar kind of an experience, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time. That's why I stayed there, despite the high pressures of the job, because of the people around me. I think one way it distinguishes for me is really the entrepreneurial spark in me got again fired up when I went to Piramal, because by that time I was more into working as a brand person or in an MNC kind of a role, or understanding brand management. But when I went into Piramal, it was a very different, because the company's DNA is entrepreneurship. So it really worked out very well for me as an individual, because I like that kind of freedom, responsibility, building something on my own, and accountability, and putting your neck on the line. So that's something that comes naturally to me. I like that. Uh, uh, so that was the reason why it was such an amazing journey for me. Second thing that happened for me was people investing in you as a talent. Now, in so I got understanding of looking at business more as a unbiased, unattached view of business, not being attached to the stuff that you bring in, you've built, looking at it from a third person point of view. That was very nice. I also got maybe I was in a right place at a right time, but there are 2 or 3 big disruptions happened when investing there at Piramal, which is one was GST rollout. So the entire business in pharma got impacted, and so were we. So handling that, this 3-4 crisis situation really told me how to manage crisis well. One was GST, second was demonetization, third was Saridon, FDC Saridon ban, which was our biggest brand. So, how do you deal with such big disruptions, year after? And this happened in a span after, back to back after a few years. So not easy to kind of get the business out of this kind of a, spiral, which is going downward, and pulling it out. At the same time, upgrading talent, doing the right things for the businesses. So that, the leadership was thankfully having faith in the abilities, and there were trying times, but as I said, I was blessed to be working with some of the best leaders, including my managers and all of them. So it worked out pretty well. I mean, all of this is in hindsight, of course, Shailesh, because what happens is that time you hate it, but now I'm looking back and answering. So it's,
Exactly.
I'm saying it so nicely, but that moment you're frustrated. But my larger lesson in this conversation is don't lose hope, is the point. I mean, you have to, somebody is watching you, somebody's taking care of you. And when you look back, you will enjoy this process also, even if it is tough. That's the reason I'm sharing that.
No,
You will
fantastic.
self-doubt many times, but don't worry. I mean, don't lose hope.
Yeah, that's wonderful, wonderful. No, you have the advantage of looking retrospectively, but still those learnings have to be carried with you, right? Right. I presume that you were already in a leadership role, managing people as well at that point of time.
Yes, I joined them as a when I joined Piramal, I joined as a head of modern trade sales and e-commerce sales head, along with marketing head. So there were the teams working under.
And how has been your experience in handling people? Because from an individual contributor role, you moved into a leadership role and you handle teams, business challenges. How has it been for you? Just wanted to pick your.
I think people management role happened to me much earlier when I was in Godrej. So I've always been handling people but the quantum of people that I started handling was very large in sales
It's
when you become a business lead. So I think the fundamental thing that I realize is that nobody comes to an organization to say I want to do bad work. I mean, I'm yet to meet somebody like that. So everybody comes with a hope of doing. So as a job of a leader is really to create that culture or that environment to enable that kind of performance. That your
right.
job is really that.
Right.
Second thing is also, I think, creating systems and processes as team becomes large because you cannot manage everybody. You have to manage by exception, and therefore systems and processes and data becomes very critical. So that's the second bit that was my learning. Third bit is that you have to lead with certain values, and your own values matter. For me, my own core values are humility, transparency, trust. Those are important values, and performance, and these are things that I like to kind of hold myself accountable to. So if you're honest enough and with people, even if sometimes you say something that they may not like to hear, it's if you say it nicely and make it logical to them, people understand why you're saying what you're saying. So leading with a why becomes more important than leading with a what. So that is another learning I've had over the years, and that it was not a challenge really for me to manage people because maybe what comes naturally to you is not a challenge. So it was pretty fun for me. I mean, being accountable because in the end of the day, I'm a voice for the people that I'm handling, right? And I'm a trustee of that relationship with the organization. So just as the way I'm a trustee of the brand that I'm handling today, I'm also a trustee of the trust that the team puts into me to be their voice at the right forum where I should speak for them. And both ways, I mean, it's that kind of a thing.
Absolutely. No, fantastic. That's thanks a lot for mentioning that, because at the end of the day, it's trust which is the center of the business, whether you talk to your stakeholders or your internal employees as well. Dhaval, I wanted to ask, as a specialist of consumer marketing and direct to consumer, I specifically wanted to ask this question to you from a pharma lens, and and I'm sure you will help us clarify. When we manage the life cycle of brands, essentially pharma is prescription, RX driven. I'm sure you know that by now. And so we have stakeholders are physicians and patients, as you said, right? And we know during the life cycle management, very often decisions get taken on brands, strategic decisions, important decisions. We'll make it from an RX, pure RX to an OTX, OTX to an OTC, and then we know DTC. These are nice. Transformation happens along the life cycle. I have two questions. Marketers listening to you, what stage such decisions are generally taken? Is it because of the life cycle maturity stage, and also is it because of other commercial compulsions to enhance access and profit, or is it genuinely trying to make the product reach access to other customers? And secondly, how do you define essentially the handling of OTX, OTC, DTC? Obviously, all the three are not in this. They're used very loosely in the, interchangeably. So can you just try and clarify this as well? So these two parts, I hope, yeah.
Yeah. See, to my mind, the way I see it, the movement from RX to OTC or OTX or D2C depends on 3 or 4 factors. One is, are the prescription declining but the demand increasing? Then it's a great brand to switch, which means that people are adopting it. Second thing is the size and the velocity of the brand. If it is crossed, let's say, a 15-20 crore size and has a velocity of growth, then it's a great brand to switch, assuming that the category is also ripe for consumer adoption and self-medication. Third thing, the way I see it somewhere, is the top management or owners' support to this initiative, because many times consumer journey will suck in a lot of dollars, and that doesn't happen without at least in the initial 2-3 years, the P&L is not healthy, irrespective of whichever way you cut it. You'll rarely see brands going very fast. So at that first 3 years, support from management is very, very critical to drive. And fourth thing, the way I see it, is that is the category something which is of self-medication or self-care, as I call it loosely speaking. So where consumers can make their own decisions without waiting for the doctor. It's not threatening. It's not like if I have to have a plaster, then I'll have to go to the doctor. But if it is a fungal infection, I can treat myself. I know broadly what if the or if it's a sunscreen, I can take care of my own skin. I know what to buy. So to me, these are the 3 or 4 broad criteria that one looks for the switch when you move from RX to OTC. Your ability to invest, obviously, as I said, is very important to create a brand. The second question that you asked is the difference between the three. I think what happens in OTX is that both the models are working simultaneously. The doctor prescription prescribers are also doing, and OTCification is also happening. In OTC, it's mostly doctor prescription is not there, but you've directly moved the brand, directly stopped prescription and moved directly into OTC. And D2C is when you launch it directly on the e-commerce or modern trade site and start advertising. A lot of brands have mushroomed in the last 5-7 years in this space and have grown rapidly thanks to the funding by many of the top VCs in this space. And some of the amazing entrepreneurial things like Mama Earth, like Varun leading that charge, or there are many examples, but everybody's put in a lot of hard work and effort to kind of build those brands the way they are, and they've found the right insight, the right category, etc. So these are the that's a difference between the broadly OTC, OTX, D2C, and this is how what I at least look from a switch point of view.
Right. Also, I'm sure you must be considering a lot of potential disruptors which have happened in this last 3 years, right? Like emerging channel power of e-pharmacy chain, and now so much of money being poured in by the venture capitalists and takeovers by Reliance and Tata. The play and the scale has got significantly high. So you see these takeovers, and so they are becoming a very big channel, powerful channel to, with leveraging power to discuss. Second, I think the consumer awareness has gone up so high, self-medication, as you rightly said. So now he is participating greater to the treatment process rather than just taking the prescription. And so that is one we are seeing. And physicians per se in the RX space, even in controlled spaces, that power is going down because you see Practos and Librates of the world have democratized treatment. So as a head of the consumer vertical, obviously you must be flooded with all these different things happening in different times. And so don't you think it's important to factor these disruptive changes in your model and go-to-market strategy, or how do you grapple with these things? Because it's so much volatile and so many changes happening. I just thought of raising that issue.
Yeah, I think it's these changes are good, whatever is happening, because what you said is right. E-commerce has really accelerated the adoption. In fact, in the last 3-4 years, it has really moved the dial. Today, there are around 25,000 pin codes in India, of which around 23,000-24,000 are being served by e-commerce. So that shows you the kind of investments the team have done on the other side to reach there. Most categories, in fact, Amazon, Flipkart completely dominate, like electronics and consumer electronics, etc. Phones are all dominated by the two. But when it comes to beauty, Nykaa becomes a very big player. Okay, when it becomes to pharma, none of these three are there. Then it's a very different ball game in pharma, where they're still small, and then that, to my mind, e-commerce is the last bastion. Is for the e-commerce industry, pharmaceutical is the last bastion of this struggle. Reason being, it's a regular monthly ticket size. You're buying every month for a very long period of time this medication, and therefore the battle of investment is happening. Like today, I read Amazon acquired globally a company, one in US. They are also talking about partnering with Apollo. So Flipkart did an acquisition of Sasta Sundar. So everybody is, and you talked about yourself about Reliance and others, Tata's 1mg acquisition. So everybody's trying their hand at it, and it will take a little while, but the adoption is, the penetration is very small in pharma. So upside is very big in time to come. Second thing is, despite the e-commerce boom that you've seen, almost 2/3 of the sales happens from metro. Okay, it's still very metro tier 1 town phenomenon. So that means there is a tremendous headroom for growth in time to come on e-commerce. And it's a channel that is increasingly important, but at the same time, not at the cost of your brick and mortar. Otherwise, it creates a friction in the business, and that's not a great idea. So the questioning becomes, the question becomes about the pricing. How do you price it? And it has to be fair to both the parties, and the discounts cannot be just going on and on and on, because at the end of the day, you want to have a brand, certain brand reputation, certain principles of pricing between both the channels, so that both work in harmony to drive increasing brand adoption. That's something that we look at. And a lot of people believe the e-commerce is cheap or digital marketing is cheap, but it is not actually. It's very expensive to invest in those. So one has to kind of factor that in the P&L while you are doing it. And I think today what is happening is more and more millennial being on the phone and Gen Z being on the phone. E-commerce is only going to go up from here. And thanks to the cheap data available in India, one of the cheapest market for data in the world is India. So, which is a great sign, because therefore there are a lot of tailwinds of this industry. And over the years, it will only grow. And this entire business is now driven through analytics rather than, anything else. So to my mind, these are interesting times, and everybody is trying their best to capitalize on these changes so that your company and your brand is positioned to take advantage of this tailwind versus that of somebody else.
Great, thanks a lot for that. You've been with Glenmark now, handling the consumer portfolio, and it's, in the true sense, it has the DNA of a pharmaceutical company, which we all know, being an ex-Glenmarkian myself. It's made, but it is demonstrated to pharma that you can actually build successful brands in the RX prescription space and also OTC. And there is that interconnected web as well. How has been your journey so far? And they have built brands. So what's the mindset? Is it entirely different, like left brain, right brain split, or is it interconnected web? And how has been the journey so far of building brands? It's something I would love to know.
For me, the journey has been fantastic till now. I think why it is fantastic is because the strength of the brand is very good. I handle brands like Candid, La Shield, and Scalp. Candid is very big, as you know. It's #1 prescribed antifungal brand. Sunscreen also, we are #1 prescribed in. It's one of the top selling sunscreen on Nike, also amongst the top 3 sunscreens available on Nike. It's doing very well. Scalp is doing pretty well. So the portfolio is very strong. Second thing that happens is that, and since you worked in, I didn't know that you have also worked in Glenmark. But if you know Glenmark, then it's a fairly entrepreneurial, fast-moving organization. Speed is of essence, business is of essence, and so that's to me, that's a great thing, because they are really well positioned to take advantage. As a culture, I believe we are in a very well positioned place to take advantage of the fast moving e-commerce space, because the team is very young, active, energetic, and wanting to make a difference. And that actually, the talent is a big advantage in that sense. The third thing that happens is the ability of the management to invest in OTC brands, whether it's VWash, where we have invested in the past, or whether it is Candid now, or whether it is La Shield. Thankfully, the company and the management wants to build brand, and therefore they are willing to put that money on the table where the investment needs to go. The approach is not really, Shailesh, between consumer versus pharma. It's never versus, right, for us. It's always collaborative for us. Both work together as one team, one dream. And only thing is that we try and segregate the responsibility that the consumer team will get. The consumer KRA is done, which is adoption, trials, repeat, etc., and brand building. And the pharma team helps us get the prescriptions from the doctor. And I think that's a damn good thing, because you're getting the best of both worlds, right? A very talented set of people on the pharma side, RX side, which have long-lasting relationship with the doctors, and it's among the top derma companies in the country today. So the brilliant relationships, brand positioning in the doctor's cabin, therefore leads to prescription, and they're growing very well for us in double digit, high double digit, and that feeds into the consumer demand also, and it kind of works hand in hand. It's like two sides of the same coin. So we are uniquely placed to take advantage of this self-care trend that is happening with the set of powerful brands that we have, with the R&D capability that we have, with the ability to invest in the brand that we have, and with a top-notch consumer talent team managing the entire media buying, brand building, distribution process that we have. So, and also a very strong digital team, which has fantastic relationship in the modern trade e-commerce, which has grown rapidly for us in multiple times in the last few years.
Fantastic, fantastic. No, I think you've enumerated it so beautifully, the four enablers of the business, right? In terms of talent, in terms of experience, etc. I come to the last part of my interaction with you, because we have another about 10 minutes to go, and I will definitely respect your time, Davel. In this journey of 2+ decades, you've had opportunities to work with the millennials and the Gen Zers now. The Gen Zers are one who are very exciting generation to work with, for all of us, right? They come in with very high level of talent, energy levels, and at the same time, they also need to be handled very differently, because they have a lot of ideas, copious amount of ideas, but the amount of pressure testing, rigoring out on those ideas can sometimes get challenging, and so on. How has been your, and why I ask this question is, today's generation of pharma marketeers we realize is almost 40% of the pharma industry marketeers are in the age group of 23 to 35, which is Gen Zers per se, right? And very strong brand, essentially getting into the digital marketing piece or the brand strategy piece or the other. What's your advice or kind of, take on what should they be looking at when they make their careers in brand management or pharma marketing as a career option? I know it's a broad question. What's it that your experience will help to, make them stay? Because they need to stay focused, or they need to get some, gravitas. So that's why I'm asking. So what would be your, if not advice, your just study?
Of all the questions that you asked, this is the toughest one for me to answer. Because you rather ask me how to make a P&L work, I'll answer what. Okay. But I'll try my best to give. Sure. I don't have an answer to this, honestly. No, I'll tell you some thoughts, really. I think it's more for the managers of these people than for them. Okay, first, for the managers have to be open to being questioned. In pharma, that is a little low, where Gen Z guys are going to ask 10,000 questions to you. So you should be okay with that as a leader, first of all, and give them that space to ask, even if sometimes stupid or they are not agreeing with you. It's okay to have a different point of view. But coming back to what the Gen Z guys should do, I think first and foremost thing is follow your heart. I think that is a very simple advice, but not done enough. Follow your heart in whatever you want to do. These are guys who are digital first, digital natives, as we call them. So the good old world of physical will not excite them. So but the question is that these guys perhaps want results very fast, but many a time that I say, like at least in my journey, I've seen unless you see 3-4 cycles, you don't really understand the brand, or unless you meet that many consumers every month. So there is no shortcut to hard work. That's the fundamental point. I mean, there is, whether you live in digital world or physical world, there is no shortcut. Certain processes you have to go, like you have to go and travel in the market, definitely do a sales stint for 3-4 years, then come into marketing. Don't just directly come into marketing, because it's useless if you don't do a sales stint and you come into marketing. Again, after doing a marketing stint for 3-4 years, try and go back again in sales, because the roles and the level changes and responsibilities changes. So, your ability to see cross connect thing comes very nicely when you become a leadership position. That's one. Second thing is that third thing rather. First I said spend time. This was the second, switch between sales and marketing. Third thing is, yeah, from a marketing processes point of view, it's a fine balance that one has to strike depending on the company that you work, between entrepreneurship and process orientation. And each company has their own fine balance, and you have to figure it out and find that. So to my mind, that's something where learning happens more. Fourth, fifth thing is could be to read something which is not connected to your business. I think in today's world of short messaging and WhatsApp world, reading as a habit, perhaps sometimes it may going out. So it's better to also read something which are completely unconnected things, and that helps you to connect the dots later. So what I call, disconnect to reconnect.
Right. I completely echo each of those 5 messages that you have said, and in fact, more strongly, the first and the last one, and that is there is no shortcut to hard work. Because being parents of 2 precocious adolescent teenagers, I know that, and I keep telling them all the time, one is 20 and other is 17. They believe only smart work works, which is not true. Hard work is important, and very well said, Davel. I'm happy, and I'm so happy that you said this. And second thing I think is reading, because I find that Gen Zers lack a lot on reading. I don't know, for some strange reason, when we interact with client teams, etc., in marketing and brand management in our industry, we find that significantly lacking. And they just finished reading at Kotler in the MBA school, and many of them just don't read up. And I think that's a very powerful message that you've sent. Reading actually helps to build your thought processes and help you to think better, actually. My last question is, you've had a great journey, a stellar career, and you have actually had a very fulfilling, and what I gather is you've had a career which has been built in 3 of the basic industries, and you just seem to be enjoying what you do. I think I would want to ask you if there is any last closing messages for our audience that you would love to share in terms of not just your career highlights or journey, but as takeaways or whatever besides what you have just mentioned, because it is so wonderful to interact with a professional and a sound brand building guy like you. Yeah, and I thought I will end the interaction.
I don't have much. I'm just saying what mistakes I've made, and I'll kind of summarize them in 2 or 3 points, perhaps, that will allow people to see those mistakes and learn from them. Is in career, as you grow, as I said, if I have to give a mythological or religious analogy to this, you chase Lakshmi, Saraswati, or Durga, right? And in each stage of your life, you choose one. So when you are young, you may want Lakshmi more, more important than Durga and Saraswati, because you're looking for money. But there comes a time when Saraswati becomes more important. And then there comes a time when Durga, which is power, becomes more important, designations start mattering and things like that. So figure out in each stage of life what you want, because wrong choices in career happens because you're chasing a wrong priority. So, and then one wrong choice leads to a couple of wrong moves. So each of us in every 5-10 years should evaluate, are we in still the same game of either Lakshmi, Saraswati, or Durga, and what your prioritization is. That's one thing, my own mistakes of life I'm putting in front of you and being vulnerable here. Second thing is also, instead of working for trying to get great companies, great brands, and great things, we typically go for big brand names and things. Go for great people, because great people actually are the greatest source of strength in your job, because they open up mind, they make you change, they change you forever, they rewire you, they push you, they make you uncomfortable, they grow you, they kind of put up a hand on your back when you're down and out, and they pull you out of the slump. At the same time, they push you into unknown. So to me, people matter more than brands. Work with the right set of people that before changing a job or picking up a job, figure out whom you're working with, understand the person, and is that person's value match with you. That is a very critical thing. Rest, money and all comes when you have the right thing. Money is an outcome, not an input. So chase the input rather than chasing the outcome. That's a second mistake which I learned over the years, to prioritize people over everything else. And it has played out decently well for me, and always chase that. Third thing is that, I feel, and this is my last thing, is that follow your heart. I think even if there is one left turn wrong, one right turn wrong, don't bother. It happens to everybody. You are a human after all. And wrong choices also teach you more. Tough times teach you more than good times. So follow your heart and just back yourself. I mean, more important thing is that you are the only person that you talk to more often than anybody else. In your mind, you're constantly talking to yourself. So talk nice. Like I was in Piramal and I remember, one thing from Upanishad that the family used to think is the congruence between thought, speech, and action, and it stayed with me forever. It's one of the Upanishad, right? Just as your thoughts are, so is your word. Just as your word is, so is your action. So are your, just as your action is, so is your will, and just as your will, so is your destiny. So that's from Upanishad. But I believe in that personally because I think it's something that what Nicholas Taleb says. Lindy law. I don't know if you are aware of it.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is a Lindy thing. It survived 5,000 years. It will survive another 5,000 years. So, so that's the congruence between thought, speech, action matters. Be true to that. That's it. I mean, these are mistakes that I learned over the years and summarizing them for somebody not to make them.
Dhawal, it has been an absolute pleasure interviewing you as our esteemed guest on this series. I mean, it was the first time I've had an extended 1-hour conversation with you, but it's been brilliant. I've really enjoyed every piece of your what you put out in our episode today, because there's a lot of philosophy at the end to part with, closing thoughts, but also your journey has been stellar, and you've shared some really rich vein of insights for our marketeers community, which gets gleaned out, as we have seen today. I want to sincerely thank you very much, Davel, because it's been not just hearing you, but also that you're very openly and candidly shared your high points, your mistakes, which I think, is so very important for all of us to emerge as better professionals. I sincerely thank you for your time and look forward to staying connected. Thank you very much, Davel, for your time.